First of all, thanks to Andrew and Nick and the guys for inviting us along. Hopefully everyone gets something out of this. So to start with, my name is Jodi Mullen. I am Outreach and Engagement Strategist at LBI. I have to think about that title. It's a fairly new one, and no, we didn't totally make it up. So tonight I'm going to talk about how we use creative in our SEO offering, and I suppose what we've learned about it over the last year and a half. It's pretty fundamental to how we do things, but in many ways we've learned the hard way, and hopefully you guys will see some of our insights and be able to avoid some of the mistakes that we've made. So going to talk about who we are as a company, then sort of look at how we actually use SEO and creative, look at a couple of examples of stuff that we've done that's good, look at some stuff that is charitably less than good, and then look at how you can stop getting into those less than good situations. And before, just a little bit at the end about, okay, so how do you actually do creative on a budget? You know, you don't necessarily have to have tens of thousands to do something cool. It can just be something that you can do with, you know, spare few hours and, I suppose, enough patience. And I also wasn't aware that we were being filmed tonight, so I'm going to have to deal with that. And needless to say, the sort of furore with the slides to begin with hasn't exactly put me at ease, but we'll go on. Yeah, no, none at all. I blame the free software. Cool. So I'm going to talk about LBI very briefly, but not enough that I bore you, hopefully. No, we're missing a slide here. Right, well, we'll get to that in a second. So we are LBI. Some of you may know us better as Big Mouth Media, who we used to be before we merged with LBI, and we've now merged again with Publicis, and we're going to be merging with another agency called Digitas, who I have to be very careful not to call Dignitas. This is quite important. Please don't put that in the video. So we've got about 120 people based down in Timberbush in Leith, while we operate across PPC, affiliates, various other areas like that. SEO is really our bread and butter, always has been, and Edinburgh is very much our centre of excellence for that. We lead the product development. We work with our London guys there. We work across somewhere in the region of 100 SEO clients, ranging from really small local ones here in Edinburgh to really big international brands. So we've been doing this for about, Richard, you're probably about the longest established person that we've got here. What, about 15 years? Somewhere in that region? Which, you know, is pretty old school in this game. One of our big, I suppose, icons is the unicorn, which represents our quest for digital mastery. And as you can see, this has had a bit of an impact with some people. We've had a couple of things where we've walked a unicorn down Brick Lane, which has gone down quite well. But no, in all seriousness, the idea is that it represents sort of helping brands that can be seen as quite staid become something, you know, remarkable, exemplary, and impressive. And the transition here from the sort of the nag horse to the unicorn is really what we want to do with some of these brands, and thankfully they're very excited about that. So looking at how we actually use creative in SEO, our main SEO product is called MultiSignal Search, and it's our response to how the search landscape has changed over the last few years, obviously with Panda, Penguin, all that kind of stuff. So as well as just churning out links, as you know most of us will do if we're involved in link building, we also look at social signals, citations, and various other ranking factors that are relevant to search today. You know, it's not just about links anymore. Our old link building service that we operated until a few years ago was very heavily based around article distribution, press release distribution, directories, and a few, the old school things like that have been very heavily targeted by the Panda, Penguin, etc. updates. So we've really pushed away from that in the last couple of years. It's been a pretty challenging and long and difficult process, but we feel that we're really just about there in terms of having a really compelling offering. We're driven, it's mainly an outreach-driven strategy, so producing content and actually then getting it out there, taking it to people who are interested in it, getting links in cool places, and then also focusing on branded content distribution for some of the brands that we work with, helping them manage their different channels and accounts to get the stuff in front of people that actually matter to them. We do include some of the more old school methods as well. We haven't completely turned away on the stuff that still works. So the sort of competitor analysis, more technically based kind of I suppose what we would call link scouting stuff is still very much involved in our proposition, and features quite heavily on some clients. In terms of how we actually use creative, we use it in a whole bunch of different ways. So just to clarify, when I'm talking about creative, I'm generally meaning where we go and we build something, a video, an infographic, an app, a game, any of those kind of things, rather than just your traditional 500 words of copy that you plop onto a site somewhere. The idea is to use it to get people, well, a number of different reasons. First of all, we can use as traditional link bait as we do on the client site. So put it onto the client site so that people get talking about it. It attracts incoming links. We'll work on a blog as well. We'll potentially use it as a high impact centerpiece for a really focused SEO campaign. So if we decide that we want to focus on a particular holiday destination for a travel client, we might build something around that destination. I think something we're working on at the moment is looking at, I'm not going to mention the brand, but it's sort of a vision thing where it gives you kind of a sort of an overview of what you can see from each of their main hotels. So sort of an aerial view where you kind of sweep around the whole city and pick out points of interest, which is quite cool. Hopefully something people will be really interested in. We also target specific audiences deliberately with creative. So if we see a community that we think will respond particularly well to a particular type of imagery or video, we'll build stuff specifically to target them rather than necessarily going down the old traditional routes. And we also try to use low-level creative to produce unique assets to bloggers. So we're very much a white hat agency. We don't buy links. That's one of our big selling points. So that obviously gives us quite a few challenges when it comes to actually acquiring links, as bloggers do like a few quid. So where we can, we try to offer them other things of value. So if we can offer them custom imagery, custom video, stuff that can go into their site that's actually of use to their readers, that's something that we'll try to do. It's far better to spend a few £100 on something that's absolutely checks out from an ethical point of view and isn't going to be penalised in the future, as compared to spending it on paid links that might get flagged up next month. So now moving on to look at a few actual practical examples of what we've done, and you can't go wrong with a bit of Borat, tend to find. So the first example I'm going to look at is a satellite company that we work with. They provide satellite TV services on a commercial level, so in some ways a bit of a difficult sell. They produced a mobile app which is actually based on Google Earth. And what it does is it allows you, if you're so interested, in seeing the position of any of their satellites around the Earth at any given moment, which is quite cool for a certain type of person, but obviously has limited mainstream appeal. So what we did with this app, we didn't produce it, by the way, this came from the client. We outreached that to science and technology bloggers and then focused on really specialist communities around satellites. They are out there, they are quite weird. But this is what it's all about, actually finding these niches. So generally, the people that we approached with this found it really compelling because so few companies in this space offer anything like this. It's kind of quite a geeky hook. But we did get a few bloggers interested. It was really successful, actually, and we got sort of a 50% pickup rate. We would typically expect to see anywhere in the 10 to 20% and call ourselves quite lucky depending on what that is. However, we managed to get extremely lucky with this particular example, because one of the blogs that picked it up, the content actually got syndicated to the Google Earth blog. Content got syndicated then to the Google Earth newsletter. So massive spike in terms of incoming links, traffic numbers. I think the last time we counted, which was about 6 months ago, we were up to about 1,900 links off that one piece of activity. At the time I said, well, this is an awesome example of what we can do. We're never going to be able to replicate it. And actually we replicated it about 2 months ago with another little piece of content. So that's sort of one example of how we can actually use a client asset in a good way, and that worked really well. We chose the audience quite well. We did get a little bit lucky, but that's what it's all about sometimes. So our second example is for one of our airline clients. They are quite an established brand, been around for, I think, since the 30s. And because of that, they've got a really rich kind of vein of heritage. So that they're really interested in kind of bringing that to the fore in terms of their the uniforms, the styles, particularly since retros, well, it's always a big thing, but especially at the moment, the 50s and 60s influences are really important. So about 2 months ago, they actually ran a fashion show, quite an exclusive event where they sort of showcased all of this stuff from their museum online. We managed to get someone in to take a bunch of photos, nothing fancy, just someone in with a digital camera, as you can see, someone's head in the bottom, so not necessarily completely professional quality, but we got the photos nonetheless. We then took them and we targeted them at travel bloggers, vintage bloggers, fashion bloggers, and generally people covering, that kind of fashion and vintage type of area. It was quite cool because we got loads and loads of photos, so we were able to break them down into little packs and put them together for bloggers on an individual basis. So we could go to someone and say, we know that you're interested in the brand or you're interested in this kind of thing. Our client has just done this event. It was quite difficult for people to get to, but we've got some imagery that we can offer you exclusively, and it was exclusive because we had so many images. We could give them a pack that was just for them, supply them with a whole bunch of other information, and essentially make it very easy for them to get something onto their site if they want to. Put together a press release, any other supporting imagery, just bits and pieces about the company, just make it as easy as possible. And again, that one was really successful. Bloggers sort of fell over themselves on that one. I think we were about 35%-ish pickup on that, which again is pretty high depending on what you're looking at. So they're two pretty good examples, and I think they're good examples of using stuff that's relatively quick and easy or supplied from outside, rather than spending shitloads of money. Sorry, being recorded, shouldn't swear. However, as I said at the very beginning, we've really learned this the hard way, and it would be undiplomatic of me to say that these things are bad, but they were certainly educational. So our first of two examples is looking at a bespoke illustrated infographic for a travel operator. They're a ferry company, as you probably guessed from the big ferry fun thing. So this was targeted very much at travel bloggers and people who write about parenting, sort of mummy bloggers, daddy bloggers, that kind of community, because that was who the client identified as their audience. This didn't go so well, to put it mildly, despite the fact that it was a pretty substantial investment. Firstly, we found that the infographic was way too heavily branded. There wasn't enough data on it. People saw it and they thought, this is an ad for the company. Why do I want to post this on my blog? There's nothing of value here to my readers. I'm just doing you a favor. So that was a pretty big hurdle. And the other issue was that, as you can see, it's fairly detailed. In its fully scaled up version, it's really fucking big, really, really big, and it doesn't fit on most blogs. And bloggers can't be bothered, to fiddle around with resizing it and all the rest to get it in a readable format on their blog. So some people just weren't interested. They liked it, they thought it was cool, liked the design, but too much effort to put up. And related to that, we also had issues with the embed code, where we did have some sites who were like, yeah, we'll take this, we like it, we'll put it up. Oh, sorry, we can't get the embed code to work. By the time we got around to fixing it for them, they weren't interested anymore. So we lost that by not having it accessible enough. So that was a pretty harsh lesson to learn, as you can imagine. So the second example then is a competition that we did with a car hire company. And this was a pretty substantial piece, and on some levels it was pretty successful, but I think not necessarily in the way that we wanted to. Sorry, by the way, about the weird bullet points and artifacts. Converting the document over to open office format kind of broke it. So we're just going to have to put up with that, unfortunately. Yes, sorry, car hire company. So we ran this competition, which was to win a car, which is a really cool prize. The idea was that people would, it was called karaoke, C-A-R, that people would record a video of themselves singing with their mates in a car, and they'd get people to vote on it. Best person to, video with the most votes, best video, if you like, wins the car, which is cool. So the idea was this will produce a ton of videos, people will blog about it, lots of user-generated content, fantastic, big splash. Fortunately not. Turned out to have a bit of a limited appeal to bloggers. Again, it was that thing of it being a little bit too branded, not really getting the, well, why do I want to put this on my blog? Sort of question answered satisfactorily. The barrier to entry was really high as well. It's one thing to ask somebody to write a blog post or fill in a form or tweet something. It's another entirely to ask them to round up a group of mates, find a car, find a song they want to sing, get to a standard they think is good enough, record the damn thing, put it on YouTube, post it to Facebook, get their mates to vote on it. It starts to get really complicated. And what we found was that people just weren't interested in jumping through that many hoops. So retrospectively, we probably would have made that a little bit simpler. So what we found was that did get quite a lot of social traction. It got them lots of new Facebook followers. There was some interest in the videos in terms of voting, but it didn't have much in terms of link value, and because it was an SEO project, didn't necessarily live up to what we wanted it to do. So yeah, there were quite difficult lessons to learn, as you can imagine. So how do you stop it getting to that stage? How do you stop it getting really ugly? I've obviously touched on a few of these things in the last couple of minutes, but so first thing for me is just to remove as many barriers to entry as possible. If you're doing a competition, make it simple, make it really easy for someone to enter, make it so they have to write a blog post and that's it. If you're releasing a video or an infographic and you want someone to put it on their blog, make it so the embed code works straight away, that they don't have to dick around with it for ages. Size matters, as always. But in this particular situation, with the ferry infographic, it was too big and wouldn't fit onto people's sites, so we should have looked at downsizing that, making it appropriate for your average blog, so probably 500 to 600 pixels is the main width. The quality of the data that you use, particularly when it comes to anything like an infographic or data-driven, is totally critical. And we've seen this on other projects. I only chose one example because I felt it was representative. But when you build something like an infographic, if you aim to tell a story, make it look nice, that's all fine. But it doesn't tend to be something that people are interested in. You tend to kind of struggle with that. Well, this is a bit of an advertisement, isn't it? So really having something that's data-driven, that tells a story through the data, that people can look at and pull out different bits of information, pull off sub-stories, that tells them something they didn't know. If you're working with a company or a brand, try and find something unique, either about the company. Anyone who's spoken to me at any length will know that I bang this example out every time. But Foursquare did a brilliant infographic, I think it was an animated one, about a year and a half ago that displayed the growth of their company. And it just sort of showed you all this information about their user base, when it got bigger, where they opened, where it's set up, which was really impressive. And that told people things about the brand they didn't know before. That's the kind of thing you want to be doing. Make sure your embed code works. Do it twice to make sure you really get the point. Branding is a really kind of controversial issue in some regards. Obviously, if a client's paying a large amount of money for a piece of creative, they want to see their name on it. That is totally understandable, but that needs to be done in a subtle way. You can't have a massive logo slapped on it. You can't have it so that someone effectively sees it as promoting them. There has to be kind of an exchange aspect if there is branding. Maybe it'll work if you go to particular brand champions, but you can't guarantee that. So I think the lesson we've learned there is try and, if you can, scale back on the branding. It tends to make things go a little bit more easily. And one of the other big learnings we've had is that low budget can sometimes be as effective as high budget. Some of our most successful campaigns, like the satellite one, we spent practically nothing on that. Compared to some of the other ones, it was sort of a few hours of outreach. The asset was supplied by the client. We didn't really have to do anything in terms of creative, and that's been far more successful than massive high spend projects. It just comes down to working out your audience and everything at the beginning, actually making sure that you have got a proper outreach strategy, which we'll come to shortly, if the laptop works. So when you're actually putting together creative, so an infographic is a pretty good example. There are a few things that you should consider. The first one sounds incredibly bloody obvious given that I'm talking to a room of SEOs, but don't forget about SEO. I've seen numerous examples where people have put together things like videos and haven't thought, okay, how's this going to be used? Are we going to derive any link value from this? Where is it going to be posted? If it's just going to get plopped on Facebook or something, will we get anything back from this? Not necessarily. Think about it at the start. Related to that, think about how people will interact with it. How do you expect people to respond? If it's a video, are they just going to watch it and leave it at that? If they're going to share it, where are they going to do it? Are they going to do it anywhere that's going to provide any link value, or at least put it in a place that people are likely to then take it and blog about it? Having a strictly social piece of content really isn't going to be terribly effective from an SEO perspective. Again, make sure it actually fits on your average blog. Be really cautious of interactive elements. As you'll all know, Flash, JavaScript, Ajax, that type of stuff is quite likely to cause problems with crawling. You may create something that's absolutely fantastic looking, that may have links embedded in it, may get shared all over the place, but it might do you bugger all good because simply, it can't be crawled. Another important question to consider is, where is it actually going to be hosted? I could think of at least 2 projects where we've got the creative built, we've got it finalized, everyone's happy, everybody loves it. Go to the client, right, so we're going to set up a page for this on your site. Oh, it takes us 5 months to set up a new page on our site. Shit. Or client doesn't have a blog and they don't want to put it up. So, that can really put the skids on an entire project, get it sorted at the beginning. And finally, make it easy to share. I had a conversation with someone today about how, we can encourage more people to join the Facebook group and making you have to jump through all these hoops before you can share it with your mates. It's like, no, don't. Just let it so that people can get it out there. They can write about it. They can retumble it, whatever. Just as few barriers as you can possibly have is the way to go. So when you're putting all this together into an actual outreach plan, what should you consider? As I said, our offering is very outreach driven. That's part of my title, so it's something I tend to be quite focused on. The very first thing to consider is, what do you actually need to achieve in terms of your results? Could be, but not necessarily how many links do I need to achieve, how many people need to see this, but that really dictates your entire thing. If it is a social campaign, fine, don't worry about the links. If it's not, you obviously really need to start thinking about, okay, how many people are going to pick this up? How many people, therefore, do I need to contact? So if I need 10 links or 20 links, that probably means I need to contact 100 to 200 bloggers, depending on exactly how you're operating. Think also who your audience is, because again, that very much dictates who's going to pick it up. If you take it to the wrong people, if you miscalculate that, it's going to fall flat in its face. We've seen that a few too many times for comfort. We've learned from it, but it's not been fun. Ask the question from the blogger's perspective, what's in it for me? That's fundamental. It's one of those things that you hear in every single SEO Moz blog post ever, but it's really, really important. And again, it comes back to that whole angle of branding and someone doing you a favor. If a piece of creative, I suppose if any piece of SEO content isn't offering something of value to a site's users, it's not going to go anywhere. No one's going to post it. No one's going to do something for free just for the sake of it. It really needs, there needs to be sort of a compelling value proposition. It might be that there's not, and you need to look at other ways of incentivization. I'm not going to go into those. I think it's outside the scope of this presentation. But there's options. I'm also a massive fan of using a tiered strategy to balance risk versus reward. Any blogger outreach is inherently risky in the sense that it could go wrong. So you really need to start looking at how you balance that out. When I'm putting together a strategy, the first thing I look at, aside from that, okay, what do I need to achieve, is how can I cover this off in the easiest possible way? How do I know that if nothing else goes right, I'll at least have achieved the bare minimum that I need to achieve? On top of that, I start adding on my riskier propositions. Okay, we'll go to high-level bloggers with this who might take it, they might not, but our strategy is not going to rest on it, because if it does, it could potentially all fall apart. You need to have your minimum level covered off. So obviously, one thing to look at when you're doing that is what are your safe bets? Who are the bloggers that you already know? Who are the friends that you can lean on? How can you get this thing out? Is there any paid media you can use to get guaranteed eyes on it? That type of thing. Factor that into the strategy to begin with, and you get off to a really solid base. Anything on top of that, it's a bit of a bonus. And then I suppose the final thing is, when all that's done, when you're kind of at the how do we make this look as good as possible stage, how do you squeeze extra value from it? And one of the obvious ways is to look at other distribution channels for an infographic. There's various hub sites of varying quality, and even social platforms, stuff like Tumblr, Pinterest. It could be a case of adding it to a few boards, and you suddenly find 6 months later that a whole bunch of extra links have appeared because people have liked this. It's sort of looking at the long term and just thinking that a small action now can have benefit later on. You might not report back on it, but if the client site continues to perform well, that's all good. I think we've just got couple of other things. So last thing, how do you actually do this on a budget? How do you do it if you don't have 10K sitting around in a PO waiting to do something with? This looked a lot bigger before the thing ripped it down. So the first thing to do is to look at what you can actually repurpose and refresh in terms of something that you may have created already or that a client has. If you can take something and kind of respin it, change the colors, update it from 2012 to 2013. That can save a hell of a lot of effort and money. Also, obviously, using any connections that you've got, if you know, getting slightly rowdy. If you've got designers, you know, any sort of people that you know, even people who can write for you, call in all the favors that you can. It might be a case that you just need to do it once. After that, you've got proof of concept. You can sell it. Everyone's happy. One thing we found is that templating really helps with scale, particularly when it comes to lower spend clients. If you're able to produce a set of templates that can be fairly easily customized, you make kind of an initial investment in that. And from there on, it just becomes a case of changing a few colors, changing a few shapes, adding unique text. As long as you're not overdoing it, stuff looks quite unique, looks quite nice, you can get away with doing that. And finally then, there's a whole bunch of different free resources that you can use. I'm a massive fan of public data sets. I don't know if everyone's familiar with the Guardian data blog. If you're not, you should be. There's about 2 or 3 years worth of data sets on every single topic that you can imagine that are public domain, that you can pretty much do what you want with. This is pretty fantastic if you've got a client who maybe can't do market research, or there's just no money, or even if you just want to do something, you know, for your own agency or your own personal brand. Pull some data, put together something interesting, create some cool link bait. There's really no effort or research expense involved in that. There's also a bunch of different tools around, stuff like Infogram, Pictochart, they're for putting together infographics and sort of, you know, kind of flowcharts, data-driven things. They're of varying quality, but tend to be pretty good if you're doing things on the cheap. ThingLink's another one that's good for stuff on the cheap. You need to be quite careful with that. In its natural state, it doesn't, I think it's a JavaScript thing. So link value of stuff embedded into it doesn't tend to pass. But if you get in touch with the nice people, they will often make it so that you can, which is pretty cool. And then Easily is another one that, again, sort of focuses on that infographic, self-created graphics kind of thing. Again, something you can access for free. Looks all right, not the same as a professional designer, but it's reasonably decent. And that is me.